You think you can sit in my county and disrespect my badge?
I haven't disrespected anything, Sheriff. I've cooperated with every request you've made. I'm not sure what else you're expecting from me.
Sheriff Penner jabbed a finger into Ellerbeck's chest.
See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. That smart mouth attitude. Nobody asked for your attitude, man. Keep your mouth shut.
Ellerbeck absorbed the tirade without comment. He regarded the sheriff with quiet patience. What Sheriff Franco Penner didn't know was that Archie Ellerbeck's name carried weight in places the sheriff had never imagined, and a phone call was about to prove why. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The road into Harlan County, Georgia looked the same as it always had. Flat, quiet, unimpressed with itself. Archie Ellerbeck had driven this stretch of US 84 more times than he could count. First as a boy in the back seat of his father's Buick, then as a young man coming home on leave, and now as someone who had long since stopped calling this place home. The black Tahoe hummed steady beneath him. The Georgia pines stood at attention on both sides of the road like they were waiting for something to happen. He wasn't planning to stay long. Visit his mother Agnes, eat her cooking, sleep in his old room for one night. Then Savannah, the airport, and a flight to Washington for a briefing that did not allow for delays. Simple, clean, in and out. But his stomach had other ideas. He spotted Wachter's Diner from the highway. Red and white sign, half-full parking lot, the kind of place that had been there since before he was born. He pulled in. Checked his watch. He had time. The bell above the door announced him. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and bacon grease and pie crust. Red vinyl booths along the windows, a long counter with round stools bolted to the floor. Most of the seats were taken. A few older farmers, a retired-looking couple near the window, two men in work boots at the far end. Nobody paid him much attention. He took a stool at the counter. The woman behind it moved toward him before he'd even settled. Mid-60s, strong hands, silver hair pulled back, practical. Her name tag said, Darlene. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," he said. "And whatever pie you've got that's been in there longest. That's always the best one." She smiled at that. A real one, not a customer service one. Peach. Made it this morning. Perfect. She poured his coffee and disappeared toward the pie case. Archie wrapped both hands around the mug and let the warmth settle into his palms. Outside the window, a pickup pulled into the lot. He wasn't paying attention to it. He should have been. The bell above the door rang again. Archie heard the room change before he saw anything. It was subtle. The kind of shift that happens in a space when someone walks in who owns it. Conversations didn't stop exactly. They just got quieter. Backs got a little straighter. He turned his head slowly. Two men in tan sheriff's uniforms. The one in front was lean and sharp-featured, with early gray hair and a jaw that looked like it had been clenched since birth. His badge caught the diner light. The name tag below it read Pruitt. He moved through the room like a man who had never once been told to wait for anything. The man behind him was older, heavier, with a weathered face shadowed by a wide cowboy hat. "Deputy?" He hooked his thumbs in his belt and looked around the room with the flat eyes of someone doing a routine check on his territory. Archie turned back to his coffee. He heard the footsteps stop behind him. "Where are you headed?" Archie turned. Penner was standing 2 feet away, looking at him the way a man looks at something he's already decided doesn't belong. "Visiting family," Archie said. Calm. Even. "Passing through? Or you live here?" "I grew up here." He picked up his coffee mug. "My mother lives on Ellington Road." Penner's eyes moved over him slowly. The locks, the denim jacket, the way Archie held himself without shrinking. Something tightened in the sheriff's face. "I'm going to need to see some ID." Archie set down his mug. He reached into his jacket without hurry and placed his driver's license flat on the counter. Penner picked it up, looked at Archie, looked back at it. The silence stretched out long enough that Darlene Wachter, standing behind the counter with the peach pie in her hand, stopped moving. Then Penner set the license down and said it. "You got an attitude, son." The word son landed like a slap. Archie looked at him steadily. No heat in his voice, no tremble. Just a quiet, unmovable calm that seemed to irritate Penner more than anger would have. "I haven't been anyone's son since my father passed, Sheriff." A beat. "Is there something I can help you with?" Penner's eyes narrowed. He took one slow step closer, close enough that Archie could smell the coffee on his breath, and dropped his voice to something low and deliberate. "See? That right there. That's the problem." He tapped the counter once with 2 fingers. "I ask you a simple question, and instead of just answering it like a normal person, you want to get smart with me." "I answered every question you asked," Archie said. "You answered it with lip." Penner's voice stayed low, but the edge in it sharpened. "That's a different thing." The retired couple by the window had stopped pretending to eat. The 2 men in work boots were staring into their plates. The whole diner had gone into that particular kind of stillness where everyone is listening and nobody wants to be seen doing it. Archie turned back to his coffee. He wrapped his hands around the mug again, deliberately unhurried, and took a slow sip. That was what did it. "Hey!" Penner's hand came down flat on the counter beside Archie's mug, hard enough to rattle it. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Archie set the mug down. He turned and looked at Penner with the same steady, unblinking calm he'd carried the whole time. Not defiant, not afraid, just present, immovable. The look of a man who has stared down things considerably more dangerous than a county sheriff, and never once blinked. Penner didn't like that at all. "You think this is funny?" Penner said. His face had gone the color of old brick. "You think you can sit in my county and disrespect my badge?" "I haven't disrespected anything," Archie said evenly. "I showed you my ID. I answered your questions. I'm drinking my coffee." He paused. "I don't know what else you're looking for, Sheriff." "I'm looking for some respect," Penner said, nearly spitting the word, "which apparently your mama forgot to teach you." Something moved behind Archie's eyes. Brief, contained. His jaw tightened just slightly. The only crack in the calm. Darlene Wachter set the pie plate down behind the counter with a small ceramic click. Her hands weren't steady. "Sir." One of the younger farmers near the back cleared his throat quietly, like he was thinking about saying something. One look from Penner, and the man went back to his eggs. Penner turned back to Archie and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Last chance," he said quietly. "You want to apologize for your tone and walk out of here? Or you want to make this into something it doesn't need to be?" Archie looked at him for a long moment. "I have nothing to apologize for." The smile disappeared. Penner looked over his shoulder at the deputy in the cowboy hat. Something passed between them. Not words, just a small nod. The deputy unclipped the handcuffs from his belt, and the whole diner went still as a held breath. The handcuffs were cold. Archie felt them close around his wrists, one click, then another, and he did not move, did not pull away, did not say a single word. He sat straight on that counter stool while Deputy Garvin cinched the cuffs tight enough to mean something, and he stared straight ahead at the pie case like it was the most interesting thing in the room. Darlene Wachter had gone completely white. "You're making a mistake," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Penner didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, I'd appreciate it if you stayed out of law enforcement business. He didn't do anything." Darlene. The way Penner said her name was a door closing. Final. She pressed her lips together and took one small step back. her hands gripping the edge of the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Nobody else said a word. The retired couple by the window stared at their plates. The farmers looked away. The two men in work boots found something fascinating about their coffee cups. The whole diner had made its collective decision. Heads down, eyes low, don't get involved. It was the kind of silence that had its own sound. Archie heard all of it. Garvin grabbed him by the arm and pulled him off the stool. Not violent, but not gentle either. The kind of handling that communicated exactly how much the deputy thought of him. Archie found his footing, straightened to his full height, and walked toward the door without being dragged. Penner held it open with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "After you," he said. The patrol car smelled like pine air freshener and old coffee. Archie sat in the back behind the cage and watched Harlan County slide past the window. The hardware store, the barber shop with the faded sign, the empty lot where the old movie theater used to be. He had ridden these streets in his father's car as a boy. He had walked them as a teenager who couldn't wait to leave. Now he was watching them through a wire cage with his hands cuffed behind his back. He kept his breathing slow and even. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same rhythm he'd used in places with actual bullets in the air. This was not the worst thing that had ever happened to him, but it was going to matter. He was already making sure of that. The Harlan County Sheriff's Department was a single-story brick building that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. An American flag hung in the corner next to a framed photo of the governor. A deputy at the front desk looked up when they came in, registered Archie, and looked back down at his keyboard without expression. Garvin walked Archie to the processing area with a hand on his arm that he didn't need and hadn't asked for. The booking process was unhurried, deliberate even. Like Penner wanted Archie to feel every minute of it. Fingerprints, photo. A form filled out in Garvin's slow, heavy handwriting. Archie's belongings came out of his pockets one by one and went into a clear plastic bag. His wallet, his keys, his personal cell phone. Then his jacket came off, and with it, the lanyard he wore around his neck when traveling between meetings. On that lanyard was his federal contractor ID badge. The eagle seal of the Department of Defense sat at the top of it in dark blue. Garvin glanced at it, dropped it in the bag. Archie watched him do it. The booking sheet was filled out last. Garvin wrote the charge in block letters that Archie could read upside down from across the table. Disorderly conduct. Failure to comply. Penner stood in the doorway of his office with his arms crossed, watching the whole thing with the satisfied look of a man who has just put something back in its place. "Phone call," Archie said. Garvin didn't look up. "You'll get it when we're ready." "That's not how this works." Now Garvin looked up. He leaned forward on the table with both hands and looked at Archie the way men look at problems they've already decided to ignore. "I said, when we're ready." He let that sit for a second. "You got a hearing problem too?" Archie held his gaze, said nothing. Garvin straightened up, collected the plastic bag of belongings, and walked it to the back shelf. He set it down between a coffee mug and a stapler like it was nothing. Like the federal contractor badge inside, it meant exactly as much as Archie's keys. Archie was walked to the holding cell at the end of the hall. The door clanged shut behind him. He sat on the narrow bench, placed his hands on his knees, and stared at the wall across from him. He did not pace. He did not call out. He did not show them a single thing. He simply waited. And exactly 5 minutes later, the phone at the front desk rang. The ring cut through the department like something had changed in the air. Archie heard it from the holding cell. 1 ring, 2 rings, and he didn't move, didn't look up, just sat with his hands on his knees and his eyes on the wall, and waited to see what the next few minutes would bring. At the front desk, a young deputy named Holland picked up the receiver. Archie couldn't see him from the cell, but he could hear everything. The building was that small. The walls were that thin. Harlan County Sheriff's Department. A pause. Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Longer this time. Could you hold just one moment, please? The sound of a chair scraping back. Footsteps moving fast toward Penner's office. A knock. Urgent. 2 sharp raps. A muffled exchange. Then Penner's door opened and closed. Silence. Archie lifted his eyes from the wall and looked toward the end of the hallway. Inside his office, Franco Penner picked up the receiver. The woman on the other end of the line introduced herself as Captain Stella Rachford, Executive Aide to Brigadier General Amanda Felker, Defense Intelligence Agency, Pentagon. Her voice was crisp and unhurried, the voice of someone who made calls like this regularly and understood exactly what they meant. Archie Ellerbeck, she explained, was a senior-level contractor currently under General Felker's operational oversight. He had been scheduled to check in before a 2 p.m. flight out of Savannah for a classified briefing at the Pentagon. He had not checked in. His government-issued phone had gone dark. An automatic alert had been triggered in the DIA's contractor monitoring system 22 minutes ago. "We are trying to confirm Mr. Ellerbeck's current location and status," Captain Rachford said. "Can you help us with that, Sheriff?" Penner said nothing for 3 full seconds. "I'm going to need to call you back," he said. "Sheriff?" The captain's voice didn't change, but something in it did. "I'd encourage you to help us resolve this now. General Felker is aware of the alert and is waiting for my update." Penner set the receiver against his chest. Through the narrow window of his office door, he could see Garvin at the processing table filling out paperwork. He could see the plastic bag on the shelf. He could see, even from here, the blue eagle seal on the badge inside it. He put the phone back to his ear. "I'm going to need just a few minutes," he said, "to look into this." He set the receiver down without waiting for a response. Penner came down the hallway slowly. His boot heels were loud on the linoleum. He stopped at the holding cell and stood there with his hands on his hips, looking through the bars at Archie Ellerbeck, who looked right back at him from the narrow bench with the same immovable calm he'd worn since the moment this started. The silence between them stretched out long and tight. Then Archie said it, quietly, almost gently. "You'll want to take that call, Sheriff." Something shifted in Penner's face. Not guilt. Men like Penner didn't do guilt. But something adjacent to it. The first hairline crack in the certainty. He turned around and walked back to his office. The door closed behind him. Archie heard the conversation in pieces through the wall. Not words, exactly. Just tone. The way Penner's voice started firm and ended careful. The way the careful turned into something quieter, still toward the end. A man recalculating. A man who had just picked up a rock and discovered what was living underneath it. When the door opened again, Penner walked out a different way than he'd walked in. He stood in the processing area and looked at Garvin. "Cut him loose." Garvin looked up. "The charge is under review." Penner's voice left no room. "Get his stuff. Process the release." Garvin blinked once. Then he got up without another word. They gave Archie his belongings in the same plastic bag they'd put them in. He stood at the processing table and took each item out one at a time. Wallet, keys, personal phone, jacket. Last came the lanyard with the DIA badge. He held it for a moment, then looped it back around his neck and tucked it inside his collar. Penner stood at the edge of the room. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, just watched with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, like a man who had swallowed something he couldn't spit back out. Archie buttoned his jacket, smoothed the front of it with both hands. He looked at Penner once, steady, level, the same look he'd worn the entire time, and then he walked out the front door without a single word. Outside, the Georgia sun was bright and sharp. His Tahoe sat in the lot where he'd left it, and leaning against a beat-up Civic parked beside it, arms crossed and eyes red, was his nephew Rocky. Archie stopped walking. Rocky pushed off the car and came toward him, and the look on his face said that whatever had just happened inside that building was only the beginning. Rocky Ellerbeck was 27 years old and had his uncle's same broad shoulders, but none of his stillness yet. He moved with the restless energy of a young man who had learned, the hard way, that staying calm didn't always keep you safe. His eyes were red around the edges. Not from crying, from the particular exhaustion of someone who had been afraid for hours and was only now letting it show. He stopped 2 feet from Archie and looked him over, checking for damage. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," Archie said. Rocky nodded slowly, like he was filing that away for later. Then he looked at the department building behind Archie, at the brick walls and the flag out front and the patrol car sitting in the lot, and his jaw tightened. "Come on," he said. "Get in my car." They sat in Rocky's Civic with the engine off and the windows cracked. The parking lot was quiet. A deputy came out of the building once, glanced at them, and went back inside. Archie watched him go. "Your grandmother called you," Archie said. "The second you didn't show up." Rocky stared through the windshield. "She said you stopped for food and never came. I drove past the diner and saw the patrol car." He paused. "I've been sitting out here for 40 minutes. Archie nodded. "Tell me about Penner." Rocky turned to look at him. Something moved across his face. Not surprise, exactly. More like the look of a man who has been waiting a long time for someone to finally ask that question. He started talking. The first time Penner's deputies stopped Rocky, he was 24. Coming home from a late shift at the warehouse, driving his old Corolla under the speed limit on a road he'd driven 100 times. No broken taillight. No traffic violation. The deputy, Garvin, pulled him over, told him he'd been driving suspiciously, and demanded he step out of the car. Rocky spent 40 minutes on the side of that road while Garvin went through his vehicle. Found nothing because there was nothing to find. Wrote him up for a failure to comply charge that was dropped 3 weeks later without explanation. But Rocky missed a shift calling his supervisor to explain why he'd been detained. That shift cost him $60 he couldn't afford. The second time was worse. He was walking to a friend's house on a Saturday afternoon. Garvin again, this time with a younger deputy Archie didn't recognize. They told Rocky someone matching his description had been reported acting suspiciously in the neighborhood. Rocky asked what description. Garvin told him to watch his tone. He was cuffed, walked to the patrol car, and held for 2 hours before being released without charge. His name appeared in the Harlan County Courier's weekly arrest blotter that Thursday. His boss saw it, asked Rocky about it at work. Rocky had to explain, to his own employer, hat in hand, that he'd been arrested for nothing and released for nothing because there was nothing to release him from. He never fully got that look off his boss's face. Then there was Dawson, Rocky's closest friend, 25 years old, arrested twice in 14 months. Once for loitering outside the auto parts store where he worked, standing on the sidewalk during his lunch break. Once for disorderly conduct after asking a deputy why he was being followed through a parking lot. Both charges dropped. Both times bail paid. Both times work missed. Dawson's mother had taken out a small loan to cover the second bail. She was still paying it back. And then there was Mr. Cornell Walsh, 71 years old, used a cane, had lived on the same street for 40 years. Arrested for blocking a public thoroughfare while standing at a bus stop. He spent one night in that cell before his daughter drove 4 hours from Atlanta to get him out. The man had a heart condition. He didn't tell his doctor about the arrest because he was ashamed. Rocky's voice got very quiet when he said that part. Every name was black. Every charge dissolved before it saw a courtroom. But the bail was paid. The wages were lost. The names were printed. And the message, the real message, the one that didn't need to be written down anywhere, was received loud and clear by everyone it was meant for. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay out of the way. Rocky finished and looked out the windshield again. The parking lot was still empty. The department building sat there in the morning sun, patient and indifferent as it had always been. "How long?" Archie asked quietly. "Long as I can remember," Rocky said. "But the last 2 years, it's like he stopped even trying to hide it." Archie sat with that for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and took out his phone. Rocky watched him. "Who are you calling?" Archie found the number, pressed dial, brought the phone to his ear. "My boss," he said. General Felker picked up on the second ring. Archie didn't start with an apology or an explanation. He started with Mr. Cornell Walsh, a 71-year-old man with a heart condition and a cane, arrested for waiting for a bus. He told her about Dawson, about Rocky, about the bail money and the blotter, and the looks on employers' faces. He talked for 4 minutes without stopping. When he finished, the line was quiet long enough that Rocky, watching from the passenger seat, leaned forward slightly. Then Felker's voice came through, measured and precise. "You have 72 hours, Colonel. After that, I'm calling DOJ myself." Archie lowered the phone. He stared through the windshield at the brick building across the lot, at the flag, at the badge, at everything that building had been allowed to represent in this county for far too long. "Okay," he said quietly. To himself, mostly. To the road ahead. He was not getting on that plane today. The house on Ellington Road had a porch that creaked in the same spot it always had. Third board from the left. Archie's foot found it automatically as he came up the steps, the way your body remembers things your mind has long since moved past. The sound it made, that low, familiar groan, hit him somewhere beneath the chest. He stood there for just a second before pushing open the screen door. Agnes Ellerbeck was already in the kitchen. She was a small woman who had always seemed larger than her size, the way certain people fill a room not with noise, but with presence. 74 years old, with silver hair pinned back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and hands that had spent 5 decades doing useful things. She was at the stove when Archie came in, and she turned and looked at him the way mothers look at their children when they've been frightened and are trying not to show it. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked him over the same way Rocky had, checking. Then she turned back to the stove. "Sit down," she said. "Coffee's hot." She put cornbread in front of him and coffee beside it, and sat down across the table with her own cup and watched him eat. The kitchen was exactly as he remembered it. The same yellow curtains, the same rooster clock on the wall, the same faint smell of cedar from the closet down the hall. Some rooms hold time differently than others. This one held it like water in cupped hands. "Rocky told me what happened," she said. "I know. You're not on your way to the airport." "No." She wrapped both hands around her mug. Outside the window, the late morning light moved through the pecan tree in the backyard, scattering shadow and sun across the kitchen floor in slow, shifting patterns. "Tell me about Penner," Archie said. Agnes was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say, the quiet of someone deciding where to begin. She began with his first election, 8 years ago. The campaign signs had gone up overnight. Franco Penner, law, order, and safety for Harlan County. And she had known what those words meant before the ink was dry. She had lived long enough to know exactly what certain men meant by order. She had watched the department change in the first year of his term. The stops, the patrols that lingered on their street longer than they lingered anywhere else. The way young black men in this county learned to drive with both hands visible on the wheel at all times, not because the law required it, but because survival did. She talked for a long time. Archie listened without interrupting. When she finished, he opened his laptop. He set up at the kitchen table the way he set up anywhere he needed to work, methodically, without wasted motion. Laptop centered, notepad to the right, secure phone face down to the left. Agnes watched him for a moment, then quietly got up and refilled both their coffees without being asked. The public arrest records for Harlan County were buried in a state criminal justice database. Not hidden, exactly, but filed in a way that required patience and precision to navigate. Archie had both. He pulled 4 years of data and ran the numbers 3 times to make sure he had them right. 214 disorderly conduct arrests in 48 months. He cross-referenced them against census data for the county. Harlan County was 34% black. 87% of those arrests were black residents. He stared at that number for a long moment. Then he wrote it in his notepad and circled it twice. The conviction rate across all 214 cases was just under 4%. Nearly every charge had been dropped or quietly left to expire. But bail had been collected on 161 of them. Fines had been issued on 93. He pulled the average bail amount, multiplied it out, and wrote that number down too. He underlined it. Then he picked up his phone and called Captain David Malmstrom, a man he had served with in the Army, now 12 years into a career at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They had not spoken in 8 months. Malmstrom picked up on the 4th ring. Archie kept it brief. He laid out the statistical pattern without editorial, asked 3 specific questions about jurisdictional procedure, and listened carefully to the answers. Malmstrom was quiet for a moment after Archie finished. "Send me what you have," he said. "I'll make some calls in the morning." Archie thanked him and set the phone down. Agnes had not moved from her chair across the table. She had been watching him work in the same still, patient way she used to watch him do his homework at this same table 30 years ago. "You're going to fix this," she said. It wasn't a question. Archie closed the data window and opened a blank document. His fingers rested on the keys for a moment. "I'm going to try, Mama." Outside, the pecan tree moved in a slow breeze. The rooster clock ticked on the wall. And Archie Ellerbeck, at his mother's kitchen table in the house his grandfather built, began to build the case that would bring Franco Penner's machine crashing down. He worked until the kitchen light changed from afternoon gold to the pale gray of early evening. Agnes cooked dinner, fried chicken, rice, green beans from her garden, and he ate it without stopping, reading documents between bites. She washed the dishes while he kept working. Neither of them needed to explain the arrangement. It was almost midnight when he finally closed the laptop. The kitchen was quiet except for the rooster clock and the crickets outside. Archie sat for a long moment, not moving, just looking at the dark window above the sink. The numbers in his notepad didn't lie. This wasn't one man going rogue on a bad day. This was a system, deliberate, sustained, and profitable in ways he hadn't fully untangled yet, but would. He stared through the dark window at the road outside, the road his grandfather had paved, the road that carried his family's name. He wasn't angry. Not the hot, reactive kind of angry that burns fast and accomplishes nothing. What he felt was colder than that, quieter, more certain. He picked up his pen, opened the notepad to a fresh page, and wrote 3 words at the top. Not this time. Word traveled the way it always had in this community. Not through phones or social media. Archie had been clear about that. Mouth to ear. A quiet word at the end of a conversation. A hand on a shoulder after church. By late afternoon, the message had moved through the right people in the right way. First Baptist this evening. 7 o'clock. Come if you trust who told you. Archie arrived early and helped Rocky set up folding chairs in the fellowship hall. The room smelled like old wood and candle wax, and the particular stillness of a place that had absorbed a great deal of pain over many decades and held it quietly within its walls. A long table at the front, 2 bare bulbs overhead, a window that looked out on the darkening parking lot. Rocky arranged the chairs without speaking. Archie watched him work and thought about what it meant. That a 27-year-old man could set up a room for a meeting like this with the practiced ease of someone who had done it before, who had learned, early, that sometimes this was the only room available. They came in ones and twos, slipping through the side door rather than the front, out of habit more than instruction. Old men who walked slowly and sat carefully. Young mothers who had left children with neighbors without fully explaining where they were going. A retired postal worker named Jasper, 63, who had driven 20 minutes from the far side of the county. A woman named Bernice, who ran a hair salon on Prospect Street and had brought her reading glasses and a small spiral notebook. By 7:15, every chair was filled. Archie stood at the front of the room and looked out at the faces looking back at him. He didn't open with a speech. He opened with a question. Has Penner's department ever stopped you, detained you, or arrested you without cause? The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Then Jasper raised his hand. Then Bernice. Then a young man in the 3rd row who couldn't have been older than 22. Then more hands, slowly, like something heavy being lifted. Archie nodded. I want to hear from every one of you. Take your time. They talked for 2 hours. Each story was different in its details and identical in its shape. A stop with no justification. A demand with no legal basis. An arrest that dissolved before it reached a courtroom, but never before it extracted something. Bail money. A lost shift. A name in the paper. A conversation with an employer that left a mark that didn't fade. A woman named Loretta, 58, described the night her son Archie, not Archie Ellerbeck, just a young man who shared the name, was pulled from his car on the way home from his hospital shift. He was a nursing assistant. He was still wearing his scrubs. They held him for 3 hours on the side of the road, called it a routine check, and let him go without explanation. He quit his job 2 weeks later. Said he couldn't do the drive anymore. Loretta's voice didn't break when she said it, but her hands, folded in her lap, went very still. An older man named Herbert, 70, described being questioned in his own front yard, standing on his own property, watering his own garden, by a deputy who wanted to know what he was doing in this neighborhood. Herbert had lived in that house for 31 years. Archie wrote everything down. Names, dates, every detail. He asked quiet, precise questions. What time? Which deputy? What exact words were used? He was not collecting stories. He was collecting evidence. The side door opened near 8:30. Everyone in the room turned. Archie's hand moved instinctively to still the murmur that ran through the chairs. Darlene Wachter stood in the doorway. She was wearing a plain blue jacket and holding a manila folder against her chest with both hands. She looked around the room, at the faces, at the folding chairs, at Archie standing at the front, and, for just a moment, she seemed to be making a decision about something. Then she walked in and sat in the empty chair nearest the door. Nobody said anything. Archie nodded at her once. Near the end of the meeting, Darlene stood up. The room watched her. She was clearly uncomfortable. A white woman in a space that had every reason to be wary of her. But she held herself steady. I've owned that diner for 30 years, she said. And I've heard things across that counter for 30 years that I told myself weren't my business. She paused. I was wrong about that. She walked to the front and set the manila folder on the table in front of Archie. Inside were pages of neat, dated notes, names, incidents, overheard conversations, complaints whispered over coffee by people who had nowhere else to say them. Her handwriting was careful and precise, each entry separated by a ruled line. "My husband did 2 tours in Vietnam," she said. "He didn't do that, so this could happen in his county." She went back to her chair. The room was very quiet. Archie looked down at the folder. Then he looked out at the faces in front of him. Tired faces, careful faces, faces that had been waiting a long time for someone to finally take notes. "Nobody writes anything down after tonight," he said. "Nobody calls anybody. Nobody posts anything. You trust the people in this room and nobody else." He paused. "What you gave me tonight, I'm going to make it mean something." He drove back to Ellington Road with Darlene's folder on the passenger seat and 30 testimonies in his notepad, and the particular weight of people's trust sitting somewhere between his shoulder blades. Agnes was still awake when he came in. She looked at the folder in his hand and said nothing, just got up and put the kettle on. Archie sat down at the kitchen table and opened the folder. He had a great deal of work left to do. The call came at 7:43 in the morning. Archie was already at the kitchen table when his phone buzzed. Coffee half finished, notepad open, the folder of testimony from First Baptist spread out in careful sections in front of him. Agnes was in the next room. The rooster clock ticked on the wall. Outside, a mockingbird was working through its entire repertoire in the pecan tree. He picked up on the first ring. "Malmstrom." "Archie." David Malmstrom's voice was measured in the way it got when he had something significant to say and was choosing his words carefully. Archie had known him for 22 years. He knew that voice. He sat up slightly and picked up his pen. "Tell me," Archie said. Malmstrom had spent the previous evening running the data Archie sent him through the GBI's internal systems. The arrest pattern alone was enough to raise flags, the kind of numbers that, in Malmstrom's words, don't happen by accident and don't happen without someone deciding they should. But the arrest data wasn't what had kept Malmstrom at his desk until nearly midnight. It was the money. The GBI had cross-referenced Harlan County's bail and fine collection records, public documents technically, but filed in a format designed to discourage casual scrutiny, against the county's general fund disbursements over the same 4-year period. What they found was a pattern so brazen it was almost difficult to believe. Revenue collected through Penner's disorderly conduct arrests, bail payments, processing fees, court-ordered fines, had been flowing into the county general fund in the normal way. But from there, a portion had been systematically redirected, not stolen outright, laundered through a series of small disbursements to a private consulting firm. A firm with no website, no listed employees, and a registered address that turned out to be a P.O. box in Augusta that had been contracted by the county for unspecified public safety consulting services. That consulting firm had one account. That account had one beneficiary, a political action committee registered under the name Harlan Strong, which existed for one purpose: funding Franco Penner's re-election campaigns. Archie stopped writing. He stared at the notepad. "He's been paying for his own elections," Archie said. "With their bail money." "That's what it looks like," Malmstrom said. "We're still pulling threads." "But yes." Archie set his pen down flat on the table. Malmstrom wasn't finished. The magistrate, who had been signing Penner's warrants without review, was a man named Harry Bartlow. Harry Bartlow was Deputy Ronnie Garvin's uncle by marriage. He had been magistrate for 11 years and had approved every single disorderly conduct warrant Penner's department had submitted during that period, over 200 of them, with an average review time, based on the timestamps in the court filing system, of less than 4 minutes per warrant. 4 minutes for a legal document that was supposed to require independent judicial review. And Walt Graber, owner of Graber Logistics, Harlan County's largest private employer, had received 11 county contracts over the past 4 years, totaling just over $2 million. Those contracts had been awarded through a process that, on paper, involved competitive bidding. In practice, Graeber's bids had won every single time, often at prices higher than competing submissions. In the same 4-year period, Graeber Logistics had made 6-figure contributions to Harlan Strong. It was not a coincidence. It was not even a particularly sophisticated arrangement. It was a small machine, crude and confident, the way such things get when they have operated without consequences for long enough to stop being careful. Archie picked his pen back up. He wrote 3 names in a column: Penner, Bartlow, Graeber. Then he drew lines between them. "What does the GBI need from me?" he asked. "Keep collecting," Malmstrom said. "Testimony, documentation, anything with names and dates. We're opening a preliminary inquiry this morning, but I need you to understand. Preliminary means careful. This has to be airtight before it goes anywhere official. Understood? Archie." Malmstrom paused. "This man has been running this county for a long time. When he finds out someone is pulling at this, and he will find out, he's not going to sit still." "I know," Archie said. "Watch yourself." Archie thanked him and set the phone down. He sat at the table for a long moment without moving. Outside, Agnes's mockingbird had gone quiet. The morning light had shifted from pale gold to something harder and more direct, falling across the kitchen floor in a long rectangle that reached almost to his chair. He looked at the 3 names on his notepad. He thought about Loretta's son, who quit his nursing job because he couldn't face the drive anymore. He thought about Herbert, standing in his own yard with a garden hose, being asked what he was doing in his own neighborhood. He thought about Mr. Cornell Walsh, 71 years old with a heart condition, spending a night in that cell. He thought about how much money had been collected, how many times the machine had run, how many people it had ground through while 3 men divided the proceeds and called it law enforcement. Then he opened a new document on his laptop and began building the formal evidence package. Arrest statistics, financial flow data, the GBI's preliminary findings, Darlene's folder, the testimony from First Baptist, organizing it with the same methodical precision he brought to every briefing he had ever prepared for people with stars on their shoulders. By early afternoon, he had something that told a complete and damning story. He encrypted it, attached a single line of text, and sent it to General Felker's secure contact address. This is bigger than one arrest. Then he closed the laptop and looked out the window at Ellington Road. He had been right to stay. The call came to Penner's personal cell at 9:17 that evening. He was at his desk, working through a second bourbon when it buzzed. The name on the screen was one he recognized, a young man named Tyrone who owed Penner a very specific kind of debt, the kind that didn't get written down anywhere but never got forgotten either. Penner had been carrying that debt over Tyrone's head for 14 months, ever since a drug charge that could have ended the young man's life had instead been quietly made to disappear. In exchange for occasional information, Penner picked up. What Tyrone told him took less than 3 minutes to say and considerably longer to fully land. The meeting at First Baptist. Who was there? What was said? The testimonies. The notepad Archie had been writing in. Darlene Wachter walking in with her folder. And the part that made Penner set his bourbon glass down very carefully on the desk. Archie Ellerbeck had made a call to someone in Atlanta. Someone official. Penner sat in the quiet of his office for a long moment after the call ended. Then he picked up his desk phone and told the night deputy to get Garvin in here. The 3 of them met in Penner's office just before 10. Penner behind his desk, Garvin in the chair across from him, and Magistrate Harry Bartlow perched on the small sofa against the wall with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. and his arms crossed like a man who already didn't like where this was going. Penner laid it out flat. No softening, no speculation. Just the facts as Tyrone had delivered them, plus his own assessment of what it meant. Harry shifted on the sofa. You think he actually has something? I think he's a man with a Pentagon clearance and 20 years of military intelligence experience who has been sitting at his mama's kitchen table for 2 days pulling public records, Penner said. Yes, Harry. I think he has something. Garvin cracked his knuckles slowly. So what do we do? Penner looked at him. We remind people what happens when they talk. He drove to Agnes Ellerbeck's house himself the next morning. Alone, no deputy, no patrol car, just his personal truck, which was its own kind of message. He pulled up at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday and walked up the porch steps and knocked on the front door with the patient, unhurried knock of a man who is accustomed to doors opening for him. Agnes answered. She looked at him through the screen door with the particular expression of a woman who has spent 74 years developing an accurate read on dangerous men. Penner smiled. Morning, Mrs. Ellerbeck. Just doing a welfare check on some of our longer-term residents. Making sure everything's okay out here on Ellington Road. Everything is fine, Agnes said. Glad to hear it. He hooked his thumbs in his belt and looked past her into the house. A casual glance that was not casual at all. Your son visiting long-term, or just passing through? He's visiting his mother, Agnes said. Is that a crime in Harlan County now? Penner's smile didn't waver. Of course not. Just making conversation. He let his eyes settle on hers. I did want to mention, if Mr. Ellerbeck is conducting any kind of business activities out of your home, there may be county permit requirements that apply. Wouldn't want anyone to run into any complications. Agnes looked at him for a long, steady moment. My son, she said quietly, is drinking coffee at my kitchen table. You have a good morning, Sheriff. She closed the door. Not slammed. Closed. With a quiet, final click that was somehow more definitive than any slam could have been. Penner stood on the porch for a moment. Then he walked back to his truck. By early afternoon, he had made the second move. He called Walt Graber from the cab of his truck, parked in the lot behind the department where no one could see him. The call lasted 6 minutes. Graber, to his credit, didn't ask many questions, just listened, confirmed, and said he'd handle it. By 3 o'clock, Graber had called the operations manager at the warehouse where Rocky worked. By 4, Rocky had been called into his supervisor's office and informed he was being placed on indefinite administrative leave pending an HR investigation into a complaint that was described only as a workplace conduct matter. Rocky called the HR line. They told him the complaint was confidential. He sat in his car in the warehouse parking lot for a long time after that. Then he called Archie. Archie listened without interrupting while Rocky talked. He could hear it in his nephew's voice, the particular strain of a young man trying to hold himself together and not quite managing it. Not breaking, exactly, but bending. They won't even tell me what I supposedly did, Rocky said. I've been there 4 years. 4 years. And not one write-up, not one complaint. Nothing. And now I'm just suspended. Out of nowhere. It's not out of nowhere, Archie said. It's Penner. Silence on the line. He can do that? Rocky asked. He can just call my job? He just did, Archie said. Which means he knows we're building something. Which means we're closer than he's comfortable with. He heard Rocky exhale. Slow and unsteady. Rocky, listen to me. Archie kept his voice even and deliberate. I need you to document everything about that HR complaint. Every email, every name, every timestamp. Screenshot it, print it, send it to me tonight. Okay, Rocky said quietly. This isn't a setback, Archie said. This is evidence. He stayed on the line until he heard his nephew's breathing steady. Then he hung up and opened his laptop and added Rocky's retaliation to the evidence package, with the precise, methodical calm of a man who has been waiting for his opponent to make exactly this kind of mistake. Penner had just handed him another thread, and Archie intended to pull it until the whole thing unraveled. The call from David Malmstrom came at 8:15 the next morning. Archie was on the porch with his coffee, watching the early light move across Ellington Road. The air was still cool. A neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street. It felt, for just a moment, like an ordinary morning. "It's official," Malmstrom said. "As of this morning, the GBI has opened a preliminary inquiry into Harlan County arrest patterns. It's quiet for now. No press release, nothing public. But it's open, and it's real, and it has my name on it." Archie set his coffee mug on the porch railing. "How long until it becomes something more than preliminary?" he asked. "Depends on what we find when we start pulling the financial records formally. Could be 2 weeks. Could be less, if the numbers are as clean as what you sent me." A pause. "How are you holding up out there?" "Fine," Archie said. Malmstrom made a sound that suggested he didn't entirely believe that. "Watch your back, Archie." "I mean it." 20 minutes after he hung up with Malmstrom, his phone rang again. A number he didn't recognize. Local area code. "Mr. Ellerbeck?" The voice was a woman's. Measured, professional, with the particular directness of someone accustomed to asking questions that people would rather not answer. "My name is Dawn Thorne. I'm the editor of the Harlan County Courier. I wonder if you'd be willing to talk." Archie was quiet for a moment. "How did you get this number?" "A source I trust told me you were someone I should call." She paused. "I've been watching Franco Penner for 3 years, Mr. Ellerbeck. I have partial data consistent with what I believe you've been collecting. I want to run a story, and I want to do it right." Archie walked back inside and closed the porch door behind him. He met Dawn Thorne at a picnic table behind the public library. Neutral ground, her suggestion, which he respected. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s, with natural hair going silver at the temples and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She had a recorder on the table that she turned face down before he sat, without being asked. He noticed that. He told her what he was willing to tell her, which was the statistical pattern, confirmed on background, without attribution. The numbers spoke loudly enough on their own. Over 200 arrests in 4 years. 87% black residents. A county 1/3 black. A conviction rate under 4%. Dawn wrote quickly, reading her notes back to him twice to confirm accuracy. She asked sharp, specific questions. She did not ask him to speculate beyond what the data supported. Before they parted, she looked at him over the top of her glasses. "This story is going to make him angry," she said. "He's already angry," Archie said. "Now he'll be visible." The Courier ran the piece the following morning. Archie read it at Agnes's kitchen table over coffee. Dawn had done it cleanly. The numbers laid out plainly, the racial disparity stated without editorial flourish because it didn't need any. A quote from the GBI confirming the inquiry in carefully neutral language. The headline across the top of the page read, "Harlan County arrest data shows stark racial disparity. State looking into claims." By 10 o'clock, it had been shared widely enough that 3 Atlanta television stations were calling Dawn's office. By noon, a reporter from WSB had driven down and was parked outside the sheriff's department with a camera crew. By mid-afternoon, a civil rights organization from Atlanta had dispatched a field representative who called Archie directly and offered resources and legal support. The department went quiet. No patrol cars in the black neighborhoods. Garvin, who typically ran the lunch shift himself, did not appear on the road at all. Someone in the community texted Rocky to say that Penner's truck hadn't left the department parking lot all day. At Wachter's Diner, Darlene propped the door open for the first time in weeks and turned the radio up. Rocky called Archie at 4 in the afternoon, and for the first time since the suspension, his voice carried something other than strain. "People are talking," he said. "Mr. Herbert called me. Old Jasper from across the county called me. Even Mrs. Loretta. She said she hadn't slept this well in months." He paused. "Uncle Archie, I think it's actually working." Archie smiled, quietly, to himself. It felt real. The inquiry was open. The story was out. The machine that had operated in comfortable darkness for years was suddenly standing in a considerable amount of light. He allowed himself the measured call to General Felker that evening, told her the state inquiry was open, the story was running, the community had come forward. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for just a moment. Then she said, "Don't celebrate yet, Colonel." Archie set the phone down on the kitchen table and sat with those 4 words for a long time. Because she was right. He knew she was right. He had seen enough operations go sideways in the final stretch to know that the most dangerous moment was not the beginning, when you were alert and sharp and expecting resistance. It was the middle, when things were going well enough that you started to believe the hard part was over. He looked at the notepad on the table, at the 3 names in a column with lines drawn between them. Penner hadn't made his last move yet. Archie could feel it the way you feel weather coming. Not a specific shape yet, but a pressure change in the air. A shift in temperature. He opened his laptop and went back to work. 3 days after the Courier story ran, Penner's attorney filed the injunction at 9 o'clock in the morning. Archie found out at 9:47 when his contracting firm's general counsel, a careful, soft-spoken man named Patterson, who had always been unfailingly polite in their dealings, called his cell with a tone Archie had never heard from him before. Clipped, careful, afraid. The injunction argued that Archie Ellerbeck, as a federal contractor currently operating in an unofficial capacity in Harlan County, Georgia, may be in violation of federal ethics regulations by leveraging his security clearance and federal relationships to influence local law enforcement matters. It cited 3 specific instances: his call to General Felker, his meeting with GBI's Malmstrom, and his attendance at the First Baptist meeting, as potential evidence of improper conduct. It was, legally speaking, extraordinarily thin. Patterson said as much, quietly. But it contained 2 words that had done their job the moment they appeared on the filing. Federal investigation. "We're going to need to place you on administrative review pending our legal team's assessment," Patterson said. "Paid leave, full benefits, nothing punitive. But we can't have active contractors under any kind of federal scrutiny without going through the process. I'm sure you understand." Archie understood perfectly. He also understood that Patterson understood, and that Patterson's hands were tied by people above him who understood even more clearly and cared considerably less about what was right. "How long?" Archie asked. "We're hoping to resolve this quickly," Patterson said. "A week, maybe less." Archie thanked him and ended the call. He sat at the kitchen table and looked out the window at Ellington Road and let the full weight of it settle. His job, his clearance, his career, the thing he had built over 25 years, was now sitting in a review file because Franco Penner had found an attorney willing to type the right 2 words on a legal document. It was elegant, in a vicious sort of way. Dawn Thorne called at 2 in the afternoon. She didn't open with a greeting. "Penner's attorney sent us a letter this morning. Defamation claim. They're threatening to sue the Courier for the arrest data story." Her voice was steady, but Archie could hear the effort behind it. "Our legal fund is... We're a small paper, Mr. Ellerbeck. We cannot litigate a defamation suit. Even a frivolous one would take us years and money we don't have." "What are you going to do?" Archie asked. A silence that went on too long. "I don't know yet," she said quietly. I wanted you to know. Archie set the phone down. He thought about Dawn Thorne driving to that meeting alone, turning her recorder face down without being asked because she understood what trust looked like, writing the numbers cleanly because she knew they didn't need decoration. He thought about what it would mean if that story disappeared, if it got retracted, if Penner's attorney buried it under legal threats that had nothing to do with whether it was true. He thought about all the other stories this county had swallowed whole over the years. The call about Dawson came at 6:15 in the evening. Rocky's voice, when Archie picked up, had lost everything it had gained in the past few days. All the lightness, all the cautious hope, gone. They arrested Dawson, he said. An hour ago. Garvin picked him up. They're saying it's a probation violation. Archie was already reaching for his notepad. What's the violation? That's the thing. Rocky's voice cracked slightly. Dawson finished his probation 8 months ago. He got the completion paperwork and everything. Garvin is saying there's an outstanding condition that wasn't met. Dawson has never heard of it. His PO has never heard of it. It didn't exist this morning? The room was very quiet. Archie understood exactly what this was. Dawson had been the most detailed witness at First Baptist. Names, dates, exact words, the kind of testimony that held up. And now he was sitting in that cell, and every other person who had sat in that fellowship hall was watching to see what happened to him. This was not an arrest. This was a message. Archie sat in Agnes's kitchen at midnight. His job was on hold. His witnesses were being picked off one by one. Dawn Thorne was deciding whether she could afford to keep telling the truth. Dawson was in a cell on a charge that didn't exist this morning. Penner had absorbed the first wave, absorbed it, recalibrated, and come back with surgical precision, targeting not Archie directly, where the blow might be visible, but the people around him. The people who had trusted him enough to show up. The people who had the least protection. Agnes set a cup of coffee in front of him without a word, and sat down across the table. The kitchen was quiet. The rooster clock ticked. Outside, Ellington Road was dark and still. "Mama," he said, "how long has this been going on?" She wrapped her hands around her own mug and looked at him with those steady, ancient eyes that had seen every version of this that this county had to offer. "Since before you were born, baby," she said. "The names change. The badge stays the same." Archie stared into his coffee cup. The steam rose and disappeared. He picked up his phone. The kitchen clock read 12:17. Agnes had gone to bed an hour ago, after sitting with Archie long enough to be sure he wasn't going to fall apart. He hadn't told her to go. She had simply looked at him for a long moment, squeezed his hand once across the table, and walked down the hall. That was Agnes. She knew when her presence was comfort, and when it was company he didn't need. The house was completely quiet now. Archie sat with his phone in his hand and looked at the evidence package open on the laptop screen. The arrest data, the financial trail, the testimony from First Baptist, Rocky's HR documents, and now Dawson's manufactured probation violation, added 30 minutes ago with timestamps and Rocky's written account attached. The file was thorough, methodical, airtight in the places that mattered. And tonight, it wasn't enough. His job was suspended. His key witness was in a cell. The only paper in the county willing to tell the truth was being threatened into silence. Penner had not panicked. He had not overreached. He had studied the board and made his moves with the practiced patience of a man who had been doing this for a very long time. Archie looked at the phone in his hand. Then he dialed. General Amanda Felker answered on the second ring despite the hour, which told Archie she had been expecting the call. "Talk to me," she said. He did. All of it. The injunction, Patterson's call, the administrative review, Dawn Thorne and the defamation threat, Dawson's arrest on a probation violation that had been manufactured inside of 24 hours. He laid it out in the same sequence he would use to brief a four-star general, which was exactly what he was doing, because Amanda Felker had not gotten where she was by needing things softened. When he finished, the line was quiet for 4 seconds. "The injunction," she said. "Walk me through the specific language again." He read it from his notepad. She listened without interrupting. When he stopped, she made a short, precise sound. Not quite a laugh, but the sound of someone recognizing something they have seen before. "That's not a legal argument," she said. "That's a harassment instrument dressed up in legal language. What it's describing, a contractor using professional relationships to report civil rights violations, is not only permitted conduct, it is protected conduct under federal statute." A pause. "What it is obstruction. And I'm going to make sure Patterson's legal team understands that distinction first thing tomorrow morning." "I appreciate that," Archie said. "I'm not done." Her voice shifted into the register she used when she was issuing direction rather than having a conversation. "I'm also contacting the FBI Civil Rights Unit tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. What you've described, the manufactured arrest of a key witness, the coordinated retaliation against your employment, these are not local law enforcement issues anymore. These are federal obstruction and civil rights violations, and they need federal attention right now, not in a week." Archie exhaled slowly. "General, you did the right thing staying," she said. "Don't second-guess it now." She ended the call. Archie sat for a moment. Then he looked at the second number in his phone, the one a former colleague named James had given him 3 years ago, at the end of a long evening with a single sentence of context. "If you ever need someone who doesn't bluff, call Harper Sechrist." He had carried the number for 3 years without using it. He dialed. It rang twice, 3 times. He was composing a voicemail in his head when the line clicked open. "Sechrist." Her voice was alert in a way that suggested she had not been asleep, or that she woke the way certain people do, fully, immediately, without the slow climb back to consciousness. "My name is Archie Ellerbeck," he said. "I was given your number by James Whitmore. I'm sorry for the hour." "Don't be," she said. "What do you have?" He talked for 11 minutes without stopping. The arrest at Wachter's Diner. The pattern, 214 arrests, 87% black residents. The financial machine, bail revenue laundered through a shell consulting firm into Penner's re-election PAC. The magistrate approving warrants in under 4 minutes. Graber's contracts. The retaliation against Rocky. The manufactured arrest of Dawson. The injunction. The defamation threat against the courier. He laid every piece down in sequence, clean and precise, the way you present evidence to someone who will know immediately if anything has been embellished or omitted. When he finished, Harper Sechrist asked 4 questions. Short, surgical, the kind of questions that told Archie she had been processing everything as he spoke and had already identified the 4 load-bearing points in the structure. Then she said it. "Mr. Ellerbeck, I need everything you've collected. Send it to this address tonight." She read him a secure portal address. "I'll tell you why in the morning." "Can you tell me anything now?" he asked. A brief pause. "I can tell you that Harlan County has been in a file on my desk for 2 years," she said, "and that you just gave me what I needed to open it." Archie uploaded the complete evidence package to Harper Sechrist's secure portal at 1:47 in the morning. Every document, every testimony, every timestamp, the financial trail, Rocky's HR records, Dawson's probation paperwork alongside Garvin's filing showing the invented violation. He closed the laptop. He finished what was left of his coffee, cold now, and rinsed the mug in the sink and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the dark road for a long moment. Then he walked down the hall, lay down on his childhood bed with his clothes still on, and for the first time in days, slept. The phone rang at 7:03. Archie was already up. He had slept 4 hours, real sleep, the kind that actually did something, and was back at the kitchen table with fresh coffee and his notepad when the call came in. Agnes was moving around in the bedroom down the hall. The rooster clock said the same thing it always said. Outside, the morning was pale and new and quiet. He picked up on the first ring. "It's Secrist," she said. "I've been at my desk since 6. Here's where we are." She talked for 14 minutes without pause, and Archie wrote without pause, and by the time she finished his notepad, had 4 pages of tight, precise handwriting that he was going to need to read back slowly to fully absorb. The short version was this. 2 years ago, a Harlan County resident named Carl Benson had filed a formal complaint with the DOJ Civil Rights Division detailing a pattern of racially targeted arrests by the Harlan County Sheriff's Department. The complaint had been received, logged, assigned a case number, and routed to Secrist's division. Secrist had reviewed it, found it credible, opened a preliminary file, and begun the process of building a federal case. Then Carl Benson had stopped returning calls. His attorney had withdrawn. The complaint had gone cold without enough corroborating evidence to push it forward unilaterally. The file had sat in Secrist's drawer for 22 months. What Archie had sent her overnight, the statistical analysis, the financial trail, the community testimonies, the documentation of retaliation, was not just corroboration. It was the spine the original complaint had been missing. It connected individual incidents to a systemic pattern. It connected the pattern to a financial motive. It connected the financial motive to specific individuals who could be named, charged, and prosecuted. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, Secrist said, "Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. We now have sufficient predicate to open a full federal investigation. I'm filing the formal opening paperwork this morning. The FBI Civil Rights Unit, which General Felker's office contacted last night, I understand, will be briefed jointly with my team at 10 o'clock. Archie set his pen down. "What does that mean for Dawson?" he asked. "It means that his manufactured probation violation is now evidence in a federal obstruction case," Secrist said. "Which means a federal judge is going to be looking at it very soon, and that judge is not going to be Harry Bartlow." The call from Patterson came at 9:41. His voice had changed entirely from the careful, clipped tone of the day before. It was faster now, slightly breathless, the tone of a man who has received new information and is recalibrating in real time. "Mr. Ellerbeck," he said, the firm wants to convey that upon further review of the injunction filing, our legal team has determined that the claims it raises do not meet the threshold for an administrative review of your contract status." A pause. "The review has been lifted, effective this morning. You remain in full standing." Archie looked out the window at Ellington Road. "I appreciate that, Mr. Patterson," he said. "I also want to, on behalf of the firm, I want to express that the manner in which this situation was handled on our end was not—" Patterson stopped, started again. "You deserved better than that phone call yesterday. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Archie said. He meant it simply, without weight. The apology was adequate. It didn't need to be more than that. He ended the call and sat for a moment. Then he got up, picked up his keys, and drove to Rocky's apartment. Rocky answered the door in yesterday's clothes, eyes carrying the particular hollowness of a man who had not slept. His apartment was small and clean, a second-hand couch, a small television, a bookshelf with textbooks from his night classes lined up in careful order. Archie noticed those books, had always noticed them. He sat Rocky down on that second-hand couch and told him everything. The federal investigation opening. Dawson's manufactured violation now being federal evidence. Sechrest's file, Felker's calls, Patterson lifting the administrative review. Rocky sat very still through all of it. When Archie finished, Rocky leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor for a long moment. "Is this actually going to happen this time?" he asked. His voice was quiet, not hopeless, something more careful than hopeless. The voice of someone who has wanted something badly before and learned what it feels like when it doesn't come. Archie looked at his nephew steadily. "Yes," he said. "Not I think so. Not, it's looking good. Just yes. Flat and certain, and with the full weight of everything Archie Ellerbeck had spent 30 years building behind it." Rocky looked up. Something shifted in his face. Slow, careful, like a man stepping onto ice he isn't sure will hold. But stepping anyway. "Okay," he said quietly. Archie put a hand on his shoulder briefly. Then he stood up and picked up his keys. There was still work to do. The net was closing, but it hadn't closed yet. And until it did, Archie was not going to let himself forget that Penner was still sitting behind his desk in that brick building with his badge and his machine and the particular confidence of a man who had never yet faced real consequences. That was about to change, but it hadn't changed yet. Archie drove back to Ellington Road and went back to work. The federal agents arrived at Harlan County Courthouse at 9 a.m. on a Thursday. Archie wasn't there to see it. He was at Agnes's kitchen table, phone in hand, getting a real-time account from Malmstrom, who had driven down from Atlanta the night before and was watching from the parking lot across the street with the particular satisfaction of a man who had spent a career building toward moments like this one. 2 FBI, Malmstrom said. 2 DOJ. They walked in the front door carrying a warrant for the county's complete financial records. 4 years of disbursements, contracts, the general fund, everything. Archie wrote the time in his notepad. 9:04 a.m. "How did the clerk respond?" he asked. Malmstrom made a short sound, like someone who was not surprised and had been waiting to see which way the wind was going to blow. A pause. She handed over the keys to the filing room before they finished reading the warrant. Magistrate Harry Bartlow lasted approximately 40 minutes. He had arrived at the courthouse at his usual time, walked past the federal agents in the lobby without making eye contact, gone directly to his office, and closed the door. 11 minutes later, according to the clerk who told Malmstrom, who told Archie, Harry had emerged from his office with his jacket on and his briefcase in his hand. He had asked the clerk in a very quiet voice whether the agents had specifically named him in the warrant. The clerk had said she didn't know. Harry had gone back into his office, made one phone call, and come back out 3 minutes later with a private attorney's business card in his hand and a different look on his face entirely. The look of a man who has spent years standing behind someone else and has just realized that someone else is no longer standing. By 10:30, Harry Bartlow had waived his right to silence and was providing a full cooperative statement to a DOJ attorney in a conference room on the second floor of the building, where he had rubber-stamped 214 warrants without reading them. Archie received that piece of information from Sechrest at 11 o'clock. He wrote Harry's name in his notepad and drew a single line through it. 1 pillar down. Garvin was served at the department at noon. 2 FBI agents walked in while he was eating lunch at his desk. A sandwich from the gas station down the road, according to the deputy who later described the scene to Rocky, who told Archie. Garvin had looked at the agents, looked at the warrant, looked at the agents again, and set his sandwich down with the deliberate care of a man buying himself exactly the number of seconds he needed to decide something. He decided quickly. He waived his rights before the agents had finished reading them. By 1:15, Ronnie Garvin had provided a written statement covering the full scope of his involvement. The manufactured arrests, the warrant process, The call Penner had made to Walt Graber about Rocky's job, and the fabricated probation violation used to arrest Dawson. He named dates. He named specific conversations. He named Penner in every one of them. Archie got that call from Secrist at 2 o'clock. She read him the key points of Garvin's statement in her precise, unhurried way. When she finished, Archie was quiet for a moment. "Garvin always seemed like the muscle," he said. "Not the mind." "He was," Secrist said, "which means he saw everything and remembered all of it. Those tend to be the most useful witnesses." Dawson's hearing lasted 4 minutes. A state judge reviewed the probation violation paperwork that afternoon. Garvin's filing, the original completion documents, the timeline, and did not trouble himself to hide his reaction. He said, from the bench and on the record, that the violation documentation was not only procedurally defective, but appeared to have been generated specifically to harass a named individual who was a material witness in an active investigation. He dismissed the charge completely and noted his findings in writing for the federal record. Dawson walked out of the courthouse at 3:47. Rocky was waiting on the steps. Archie got the call from Rocky at 3:51. He could hear Dawson's voice in the background, not words, just the particular sound of a young man who has been in a cell for 2 days on a charge that didn't exist and has just walked back into the sunlight. Archie sat for a moment with the phone in his hand after Rocky hung up. Agnes, who had been moving quietly around the kitchen giving him space while things unfolded, set a fresh cup of coffee at his elbow without comment. He looked up at her. "Harry cooperated," he said. "Garvin cooperated. Dawson is out." Agnes nodded once, like she had been expecting to hear exactly that, in exactly that order. Dawn Thorne published the second story that evening. Secrist's office had contacted her directly that afternoon. A formal statement confirming the federal investigation was open, the FBI was involved, and the DOJ Civil Rights Division was proceeding. Dawn had not hesitated. She ran the story without softening a single number, pulling every piece of documentation that was now public record and laying it out in the clean, undecorated prose that had always been her signature. By 9 o'clock, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. By 10, it was on 3 national network websites. By 11, Archie's phone had 47 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He silenced it and set it face down on the table. Walt Graber's company issued a statement at 10:30, announcing an internal compliance review and the voluntary suspension of its county contracts pending investigation. The statement used the word voluntary 4 times, which told Archie everything he needed to know about how nervous Graber's attorneys were. Rocky called one more time before midnight. He had spent the evening with Dawson, then driven past the department on his way home. "Penner's truck is still in the lot," Rocky said. "Light on in his office." Archie thought about that. A man alone in his office at midnight, surrounded by the machine he'd built, watching it take itself apart, piece by piece in real time. "Get some sleep," Archie told Rocky. He closed the laptop. The evidence package had done its work. The threads had been pulled. The net had closed around everything Penner had built, and everyone who had helped him build it. Tomorrow, it would be visible. Archie looked out the dark kitchen window one more time at the road his grandfather had paved, the road that carried his family's name. Then he went to bed. The monthly Harlan County Commissioners' meeting was held on the 3rd Thursday of every month in the main chamber of the county building on Courthouse Square. Penner had never missed one. He used them the way a man uses a stage, standing at the commissioner's table in his pressed uniform, badge catching the light, delivering his law and order report with the easy confidence of someone who has never once had to worry about the audience pushing back. He shook hands afterward, posed for photos with the county seal behind him, reminded everyone, without ever saying it directly, exactly who ran things in Harlan County. This Thursday was no different. On the surface. He arrived at 8:50, 10 minutes early, and took his usual seat at the table. His uniform was immaculate. His boots were shined. His face carried the particular blank composure of a man who has decided, against all available evidence, that he can still control the room. Archie knew he would be there. Sechrist had known too. Agnes had asked to come. Archie had looked at her across the breakfast table that morning. This small, silver-haired woman, who had spent 74 years in this county, absorbing everything it had thrown at her family, and had not said no. Rocky had driven them both. Darlene Wachter was already there when they arrived, sitting in the third row with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes forward. Dawn Thorne sat 2 rows back with a notepad. Jasper, the postal worker, was there. Bernice, from the salon. Loretta, whose son had quit his nursing job. Herbert, who had been questioned in his own yard. The room was fuller than usual for a commissioners' meeting. People had heard things. This county always heard things. Archie and Agnes took seats near the center. Rocky sat on Agnes's left. Archie scanned the room once, noted the exits, noted the cameras mounted in the upper corners, noted the small group of local reporters near the back wall. Then he faced forward and sat still. Penner opened his report at 9:04. His voice was steady. He moved through the standard sections, patrol hours, response times, community initiatives, with practiced ease, like a man reading from a script he had memorized so long ago it no longer required thought. He did not look at Archie. He did not look at Agnes or Rocky or any of the faces from First Baptist that were sitting in his audience this morning. He was 4 minutes in when the chamber doors opened. The sound moved through the room before anyone fully processed what they were seeing. Not loud, the doors opened quietly, deliberately, but the quality of the silence that followed was immediate and absolute. The kind of silence that happens when a room collectively understands that something has changed. 2 FBI agents entered first. Dark suits, credentials already visible. Behind them, 2 DOJ representatives. And behind them, walking with the unhurried certainty of someone who has done this before and understands exactly what it means, Harper Sechrist. She rarely came to arrests personally. She had made an exception today. They moved toward the commissioner's table in a straight, even line. One of the commissioners, a heavy-set man named Aldridge, who had been on the board for 16 years, pushed back slightly from the table as they approached, the instinctive movement of a man who wants to make clear he is not part of whatever is about to happen. Penner watched them come. His face went through several things in the space of 4 seconds. Recognition, calculation, and then something that was not quite fear but was the nearest neighbor to it. He set his report papers down on the table slowly. Sechrist stopped 3 feet from him. She looked at him with the level, impersonal gaze of someone performing a function, not settling a score. "Franco Penner," she said. Her voice carried easily in the silent room. "You are under arrest on federal charges including deprivation of civil rights, under color of law, conspiracy, abuse of public funds, and election finance fraud." She read the charges in full. Every word landed in the silence like something solid being set down. One of the FBI agents moved around the table. Penner stood, not because he was resisting, but because something in him could not remain seated for this. He stood, and he was cuffed at the commissioner's table, in the room he had used as his stage for 8 years, in front of every person in Harlan County who had ever sat in this chamber and watched him perform. The badge caught the light one last time as the agent turned him toward the door. The chamber was absolutely silent as they walked him out. Then, from somewhere near the back of the room, a single pair of hands began to clap. Slow, deliberate. 1 beat, then another. Then a second person joined. Then a third. Then the sound built the way such things build. Not all at once, but in a wave, each person making their own decision, and then the decisions running together until the chamber was filled with it. Penner did not look back. He kept his eyes forward and his jaw tight, and he walked through the chamber doors and out of the building, and the sound of those hands followed him all the way to the parking lot. In the center of the room, Agnes Ellerbeck reached over and took Rocky's hand. Rocky looked at her. His eyes were wet. He didn't bother hiding it. Archie sat on Agnes's right and looked straight ahead at the empty table where Penner had just been standing. He did not clap. He did not smile. He simply sat with the quiet, absolute stillness of a man who has seen something through to its end and is taking a moment to fully register that it is over. Then he felt Agnes's other hand close around his. He looked at her. She was looking straight ahead, silver hair and steady eyes and 74 years of this county in her face. But she was squeezing his hand with a grip that was stronger than he remembered. He squeezed back. The days after Penner's arrest moved differently than the days before it. Slower, cleaner, like air after a storm has finally broken. That particular quality of stillness that isn't empty, but full. Full of something that had been absent so long people had stopped noticing its absence until it returned. Archie noticed. He stayed 4 more days after the arrest. There was still work to finish, documentation to sign, calls to take, a formal debrief with Sechrist's team that ran 3 hours on a Friday afternoon in a conference room at the GBI's regional office. He sat across from Sechrist and 2 of her attorneys and answered every question they put to him with the same steady precision he had brought to everything else. When it was over, Sechrist walked him to the parking lot and shook his hand. "You built this," she said simply. "The community built it," Archie said. "I just had the right phone numbers." She almost smiled at that. Almost. The consequences came in quickly after that, one after another, like dominoes finding their natural order. Penner was convicted on 6 federal counts. The sentencing hearing lasted 2 days. His attorney argued for leniency on the grounds of his years of public service, which the federal judge acknowledged and then declined to consider as a mitigating factor, given the nature of the crimes. 11 years in a federal correctional facility, 3 states away. The badge was surrendered in the courtroom. The machine that had operated in Harlan County for 8 years was, for the first time, completely still. Harry Bartlow resigned from the magistrate's position the morning after his cooperative statement became public record. He was later charged separately with dereliction of judicial duty and faced state-level proceedings that would take another year to resolve. But his time in that courthouse was over. The rubber stamp was gone. Walt Graber's company was placed under federal investigation. 2 of his county contracts were voided. His attorneys negotiated a settlement that involved, among other things, a substantial financial penalty and a formal acknowledgement of the PSC contributions. Graber himself avoided criminal charges by the narrowest of margins and spent the following year doing the particular kind of quiet that very wealthy men do when they have been publicly embarrassed and legally cornered. Ronnie Garvin, for his cooperation, received a reduced charge and a suspended sentence. He lost his badge and his pension. He moved out of Harlan County within the month. The federal consent decree came down 2 weeks after the conviction. It mandated the complete restructuring of the Harlan County Sheriff's Department under independent oversight, new leadership, new use of force policies, mandatory body cameras, and a civilian review board with actual authority. Every arrest made by Penner's department over the past 4 years was flagged for automatic review by an independent panel. Cases involving bail collection were prioritized. The financial accounting took 6 weeks to complete. When it was done, the number was $387,000. That was the total amount collected in bail and fines through Penner's disorderly conduct arrests over 4 years. money extracted from people who had done nothing wrong and had no meaningful way to fight back. Every dollar was ordered returned, with interest, to the individuals from whom it had been taken. Jasper the postal worker received a check. Loretta received a check. Herbert, who had been questioned in his own yard with his garden hose, received a check. Mr. Cornell Walsh's daughter called Rocky when hers arrived and cried on the phone for 10 minutes. Rocky's administrative leave was formally overturned and the HR complaint was expunged from his employment record. Graeber's company, in the process of managing its legal exposure, offered Rocky a financial settlement. He took it without hesitation and put the entire amount toward a down payment on a small house 3 streets over from Ellington Road. He called Archie to tell him the offer had come through. "Buy something with a porch," Archie said. Rocky laughed. A real one, full and easy. Archie hadn't heard that sound from him in weeks. Darlene Wachter rehung the menu board at the diner on a Tuesday morning and propped the front door open for the first time in longer than she could precisely remember. She ordered new pie cases, 1 extra, bigger than the old ones. She had a small sign made, framed simply in plain wood, and hung it herself on the wall beside the register. "All are welcome here." She didn't explain it to anyone who asked. She didn't need to. Everyone in Harlan County understood what it meant, and where it came from, and why it was there. Archie packed his bag on a Thursday morning. He moved through the house on Ellington Road the way you move through a place you are leaving. Slowly, paying attention, looking at things you normally pass without seeing. The yellow curtains in the kitchen, the rooster clock. The third board on the porch that still creaked in the same spot it always had. Agnes stood at the stove making him breakfast. He didn't have time to eat, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so. He sat at the kitchen table one last time, ate the eggs she put in front of him, drank the coffee. Let the morning be what it was. When he stood up to go, Agnes turned from the stove and looked at him. She reached up and put both hands on either side of his face. This small woman looking up at her son, and held him there for a moment without saying anything. Then she let go and turned back to the stove. "Drive safe," she said. "Call me when you land." The Tahoe backed out of the driveway at 8:47. Archie pointed it north on Ellington Road, then east toward US 84, the same highway that had brought him here. The morning was clear and cool, and the Georgia pines stood the same way they always stood, patient, tall, indifferent to what passed beneath them. He passed the Harlan County limits sign without slowing. In the rearview mirror, just before the road curved and the view changed, he saw her. Agnes on the front porch of the house her grandfather built, one hand raised. He raised his back. Then the road curved. The porch disappeared. And ahead of him, US 84 opened up wide and long and straight. The kind of road that asks nothing of you except that you keep moving forward. Archie Ellerbeck pressed the accelerator down. He had a plane to catch, a briefing to give, a general waiting on his report. And for the first time since he had pulled off this highway into a diner that smelled like peach pie and changed everything, he felt the full, clean weight of what it meant to have done the right thing and seen it through to the end. The road opened up. He drove. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.